Welcome back to Chess TV. We hope you've had a great week and that you're as excited about the new episode as we are. In the chess history, Arne Johansson has researched the history of the Oxford-Cambridge matches in chess and rowing. We're also ready to test your skills in the chess puzzle. Albert takes us further in the series Machiavelli and Me, and Alfred presents the continuation of the Queen's Indian in the opening school. But before we hand over to Albert, here's an update on what's been going on in the world of chess. First of all, we'd like to wish woman Grandmaster Natalia Pogonina a very happy birthday, which she celebrated on March the 9th. We hope you'll have a great new year in front of you. The International Olympic Committee organizes a world conference on women and sports every 4 years, which the objective of analyzing the progress made within the Olympic movement and identifying ways to improve and increase the participation of women in the world of sports. The 5th Congress was recently held in Los Angeles, and this time chess was represented in the form of Martha Fierro from the FIDE Commission for Women's Chess. She was one of the participants from more than 130 countries representing national Olympic committees, international federations, non-government organizations, and universities. Well, the ECU has implemented a dress code for chess players, and although I have to admit that I've played a couple of players that could have dressed more appropriately, they were all of the male gender. But these new rules and the debate surrounding them seems to focus more on women in chess. Come on, as if it really is a widespread problem in European chess that pretty girls wear too short skirts. Let's just get real for a second here. This is actually sort of offensive. And some happier news. Over 25 grandmasters have gathered in the impressive Harpa Concert Hall and Conference Center to play in Reykjavik Open. The grandmasters are just a tiny part of the 200 players starting field though. The last round will be played on March the 13th, and until then you can follow the event live at skaksamband.is. And now it's time for Albert, so here we go.
It is of course extremely important to understand your strengths and weaknesses, and to study tactics and how to reach power and maintain it. But power is an undesirable condition, and there is always someone who's willing to challenge you to take it from you. Similarly, you have to be prepared to challenge others for their power. The first step to do that is to be able to properly evaluate your opponent's position. I don't think I can emphasize enough how important it is to assess your opponent in an objective manner. An attack is an expensive process that requires time and resources. So before you undertake an attack, you have to be pretty sure that you will succeed. It's a bit like setting up a cost estimate before proceeding with a certain project. That's why you have to analyze the properties of the principality that you want to attack, and know just which qualities are relevant in the assessment. The first thing you have to consider is whether the opponent is strong enough to defend himself, or if he will have to use the help of others. Anyone who can defend himself will be able to afford to move the fight out to an open battlefield, while those who need help probably will be forced to defend themselves from behind their own walls. Machiavelli argues that the ruler that has to defend himself from behind his own walls will reach the greatest success if he concentrates on arming the cities, while rural areas can be left to their fate. In other words, he should concentrate his energy on a few cities that are well prepared for battle, instead of trying to defend everything. And if the prince is also liked by the people, it will be very difficult to take such a city. A city that has all the supplies within the walls and an alert and a well-trained army that can wait in standby for quite some time will be really difficult to take over. However, if there are deficiencies, such as the availability of supplies, lack of knowledge, or dependence on other powers or forces, then it's much easier to conquer that principality. So in short, know your enemy.
Last week we introduced the idea of playing a3 instead of g3 in the Queen's Indian, and we did then analyze what would happen after black's bishop to b7. Today we'll continue with white's a3 plan, but instead of seeing what happens after black's bishop to b7, we'll take a look at black's bishop to a6. The idea behind this move is to hinder white from having an easy time developing his pieces, and the greatest advantage with this move is that it creates quite a lot of trouble for white without black taking any huge risks. White's first priority here is to protect the c4 pawn, and that can be done either by playing queen to c2, e3, knight b to d2, and queen to b3. White's e3 is well met by black's c5 or d5, while white's knight b to d2 is a bit awkward, especially since the idea with a3 was to allow the knight to develop to c3. White's queen to b3 is interesting since it allows white to play knight to c3, but queen to c2 is by far the most popular move and probably the best one too. The disadvantage with queen to c2 is that it blocks white from playing knight to c3, since that would lead to white leaving the c4 pawn unprotected. But white's threat of playing e4 evens out the situation, especially since the e4 move opens up the possibility for the bishop to protect on c4, allowing white to play knight to c3. Black's next move is bishop to b7, but before we continue with analyzing this move, let's take a look at the less popular moves c5 and d5. Bishop to a6 and d5 are often thought of as a natural combination, but it only works after white having advanced with his e-pawn. This since d5 then pins white's bishop on f1, making an exchange in d5 resulting in white being unable to castle kingside. If black plays d5 directly, there is nothing holding white back from exchanging the pawns, and after c takes on d5 and e takes on d5, white plays knight to c3, leaving us in a position where white has the more comfortable position. Black's c5 is answered by white's d5. This is actually a gambit, but not for the obvious reasons. Because after an exchange on d5, black can't take on d5 with the knight, since white then can answer by playing queen to e4 check, winning the knight on d5. Knight to e7 is not recommended, since white then simply takes with the queen on a8, winning the rook. So how is black to win the pawn then? Well, after the exchange on d5, black should play bishop to b7 instead of recapturing, and after white's e4, black wins either the d5 or the e4 pawn after queen to e7. But this line has never become popular since white is considered to have full compensation after bishop d3, knight takes on d5 and castle kingside. Black is simply too far behind in the development, giving white a nice position to play from. More popular is g6 after the exchange on d5, leading the game into a variation reminding of a modern Benoni. Bishop to b7 is the most popular move though, but it can be quite hard to understand why. By playing bishop to a6 and then bishop to b7, black has only allowed white to develop his queen to c2. Well, white might have developed his queen, but actually there was an advantage with having the queen on d1. The queen on d1 supported white's d5 advance, a threat on which it was as good as forced to play black to play d5. This option is now taken away from white by this maneuver. Now follows knight to c3, c5, e4, and an exchange in d4. This position is the fundamental starting point of most of the bishop to a6 theory. It might seem as if white has the superior position, but black has some interesting ways of countering and pressing white back. The most important part here is to remember that black will build his play on a stable position only to later in the game use white's not ideal positioning of the queen and the pawn on a3. But with that, I'll end not only this week's episode of the opening school, but also the analysis of the Queen's Indian. I'll be back again next week with a new opening, so see you then.
This week's chess puzzle is taken from the game between the Norwegian superstar Magnus Carlsen and the American Timothy Taylor, which was played in Budapest in 2003. Carlsen, who played white, checkmated Taylor in 3 moves. So can you find the checkmate? You have 1 minute to do so. Good luck! So let's take a look at the solution. An important piece in this puzzle is the knight on d6 because it covers both b5 and b7. There are squares on the A-line that must be guarded, and we accomplish that by playing either rook a3 check or queen a4 check. On rook a3 check, black has only one possible answer, namely rook a5. And here it may be difficult to find the next move, but there is actually only one checking move left, which is queen c4 check. And if this move wouldn't been a check for some crazy reason, black would just play queen e1 checkmate. But now, thankfully, it is a check, and black can therefore choose to play either b5 or queen b5. If he chooses the pawn, we answer with queen c6 checkmate. And if black instead chooses to cover the check with the queen, we can either play queen c8 checkmate, or why not just capture the queen with our queen checkmate. The knight is guarding b5, and the rook can't capture the checking queen as a result of the pin down. So, as I said, there is another possible variation for white in the starting position. White can also play queen a4 check. This variation works just the same way as the rook move does, and is absolutely just as promising as the rook move. Because even on queen a4 check, black must play rook a5, and on queen c4 check, black has three possible answers. At b5 with the pawn, we play queen c6 checkmate. On queen to b5, we checkmate with queen c8 checkmate. And on black's third possible answer, rook b5, we play rook a3 checkmate. Black can't block the check with his rook because it's pinned down by our queen. Well, just like Carlsen, you always have to be alert and not miss these kind of chances when they appear in a game. It is so that even if you're a strong strategic chess player, you can't always get that far without being able to find these combinations in your games. Checkmate combinations are, after all, the fruit of a good strategic game. I really hope you found the solution. If you didn't, you just have to keep on practicing. So, now it's time for some chess history with Professor Arne Johansson. Enjoy!
Most people probably know about the rowing fights between the Cambridge and Oxford universities. But there are probably fewer who know about the traditional chess matches between the two universities. Both the rowing fights and the chess fights are known to often be hard and very tight. The 130th chess match was recently played, and Cambridge won by 4.5 against 3.5. Nowadays you can study the results on internet, and in 2010 the match ended 4 against 4, while Oxford won by 4.5 against 3.5 last year. The ELO rating at the first board 2010 was approximately 2,500, but the rating decreased rapidly towards the last boards. The accumulated match result is now 67 against 63 in Cambridge's favor after the 130 matches. In the childhood of this competition there was of course no internet, so to find out more about the details of those matches, we turned to the news media of that time. And I have such a source here in my lap. It is the fantastic The Illustrated London News, which really deserves the name Illustrated. In the volume I have here in my lap, well, that contains the issues from the first 6 months of 1877 and probably contains several hundred fine illustrations. In the beginning of 1877, England was hit by severe storms, and the reporters from the Illustrated London News were out there observing and sketching, which later led to articles and fantastic illustrations, like this picture of the storm at sea. They of course also reported from India, and in exceptional cases the illustrations were even given in color, like in this illustration, with very English character. The traditional rowing competition also took place in the spring of 1877, and the front page of the issue from March 24 depicted the rowing practice, which seems to have attracted quite a few spectators. The rowing competition was a big event, and the teams were each depicted on a full page. The following week there was an illustrated report from the race with illustrations on the front page and on this spread. The magazine also had a chess column that reported about chess events in the London vicinity and from other parts of the world. Among other topics, they also reported about working class chess, which also had started in Sweden with club activity at that time. In one of the issues, it is reported about a match between the Working Men's Chess Club and the Institute Union. In a June issue, the chess column reports from a blindfold simultaneous exhibition over 10 boards with Blackburn as the player at the London club. He won 8 and drew 2 games. The chess match between Cambridge and Oxford did not receive the same attention as the rowing competition, but in the issue from March 24 we can find this chess column, which at the end reports about the preparations of the university match. And that the match, after some confusion, was going to be arranged at the St. George's Chess Club. The following issue could report about the result in the match, which was the 5th from the beginning. It was played over 8 boards and Oxford won by 9 against 3. Yes, the result was actually 9 against 3, and if I have interpreted it correctly, one played 2 games at each board unless the first game lasted for too long. This meant that 12 games were played instead of 16. The chess column reports 2 of these games. If we go back to the very first match, we note that it was played in 1873, and one of the persons behind the initiative was none less than Wilhelm Steinitz. The first couple of matches attracted about 700 spectators each, and a number of famous players have participated over the years. John Nunn played on the Oxford team in 1978, but to everybody's surprise he lost against a Cambridge player who started with a pawn from g2 to g4. Well, we end here by taking a look at Nunn's game from the Cambridge-Oxford match in 1978, but we will return next week with a new theme, so see you then.
Thank you for watching. We hope you enjoyed this week's episode and that you'll be back again next week. So hope to see you then. Bye.